Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. I'm Rev. Dave Hunter, one of the fellowship's ministers. With me here this morning in our remote studio is the Reverend Carrie Muller, our more senior minister. My topic this morning is heaven. We'll take a closer look at what it might be like. We gather together on Sunday mornings not because we share a creed, but because we share a promise to support one another on our spiritual journeys. Our services are different each week, but the love and compassion we offer one another here remains the same. So, whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, we're glad to have you with us today. And please stay after the service for coffee and conversation. And in about an hour, we'll probably be joined by other people who haven't reset their clocks. This is the time for announcements. So if you have a relevant announcement, please unmute yourself and share your message.
I have one. In the chat box is the donate button, which you can also send checks, but we're participating in the UUA's Texas Relief Fund. So we've done it for 2 weeks and this is the last week. And so if you care to donate, please click on that link, or you can go to our website and do it, but you can also send a check. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Now I invite you to ignore outside distractions, take a deep breath, settle more firmly into your body, and listen to the sound of the chime. And now, the opening words. These are the days that have been given to us.
Let us be thankful for them.
These are the days of challenge and uncertainty.
Let us respond in humility and with courage.
These are the days of endings and beginnings.
Let us honor the past as we prepare for the future.
These are the days that have been given to us.
Let us live in them fully.
And now Mary will ignite our chalice flame. We light this flame of faith to witness to the mystery in which our lives are embedded. May we experience awe. May we give thanks. May we radiate joy. May we embody love. And can we take a look at the chalice?
I've spotlighted it for everyone.
Okay. Now our opening hymn will be Beethoven's familiar Hymn to Joy, which Carly will play. In our hymnal, it's hymn 143, Not in Vain the Distance Beacons. Carly? At this time in our service, we join with many other Unitarian Universalist congregations in sharing what is in our hearts and on our minds. If there is an event in your life which moves you this morning to joy or sorrow, to hope or gratitude, please unmute yourself and share a few words with us. Rev. Carey will drop a stone into the bowl of water so that its ripples may remind us that what touches one of us affects us all.
I have a joy.
Miranda,
a
yes.
couple of joys. Thank you. Yesterday I had my first vaccine shot, And yesterday I also found an appointment for Gary. So we're getting there.
Yes, one step at a time. We all need it.
I think we all have a joy that Linda's back with us and doing well after her surgery. So welcome back, Linda.
Yes, glad you're here, Linda. As participants in this religious community, let us all hold on and care the joys and sorrows we have heard here, those we may be carrying that are too tender to share as yet, and those of all humanity. Let us pause in silence to feel our connections with others, those who feel joy this morning, those who are in sorrow, and those who feel both. Let us feel our connections to those in this room, those in the Pottstown area and across the nation, and those wherever they may be. Amen. Now let us join together in the spirit of prayer, meditation, and contemplation. Spirit of love, spirit of faith, spirit of hope, be with all of us as we go through life, never knowing what lies along the road ahead, but always aware of our final destination. Bind our hearts together in this sacred community of humanity. Bind our hearts together in this sacred hour. Bind our hearts in love and faith and hope. Give us the strength to continue when we feel like giving up. Give us the vision to continue when we do not see the way. Give us the voice to continue when sadness shuts us up. Help us to feel your presence through the presence of each other. Help us to sense that we are not alone, that we are never alone. Help us that we may help others. Be with us, abide with us, hold our hand when our time comes, when it is our turn to say goodbye. We pause in silence. Amen. Now Carly will play our meditation hymn, the familiar Spirit of Life. With a few short readings before we move on to my message. This first is by Thomas Cathcart and Daniel Klein from their book, Heidegger and a Hippo Walked Through Those Pearly Gates. Some Christians think of St. Peter as the gatekeeper to heaven, admitting the worthy and sending the less fortunate elsewhere. Here are two short, non-biblical stories of interviews with St. Peter. And after I've done those, I'll read a third one, The Universalist Solution by David Eagleman, in this book. A man dies and goes to the judgment. St. Peter meets him at the gates and says, "Before you meet God, I thought I should tell you, we've looked at your life and you really didn't do anything particularly good or bad. We're not sure what to do with you. Can you tell us anything you did that can help us make our decision?" The applicant thinks for a moment and replies, yeah, one day I was driving along and came upon a woman who was being harassed by a group of bikers. So I pulled over, got out my tire iron, and went up to the leader of the bikers. He was a big, muscular, hairy guy with tattoos all over his body and a ring through his nose. Well, I tore out his nose ring and told him he and his gang had better stop bothering the woman or they would have to deal with me. I'm impressed, St. Peter responds. When did this happen? About 2 minutes ago. Here's the second story. It got crowded in heaven, so St. Peter decided to accept only people who'd had a really bad day on the day they died. On the first morning of the new policy, St. Peter said to the first man in line, tell me about the day you died. The man said, oh, it was awful. I was sure my wife was having an affair, so I came home early from work to catch her in the act. I searched all over the apartment and couldn't find her lover anywhere. So finally I went out on the balcony where I found this man hanging over the edge by his fingertips. So I went inside, got a hammer, and started hitting his hands. He fell, but he landed in some bushes and survived. So I went inside, picked up the refrigerator, and pushed it out over the balcony. I crushed him. But the strain of hefting the fridge gave me a heart attack, and I died. St. Peter couldn't deny this was an awful day, and it was a crime of passion. So he let the man enter heaven. He then asked the next man in line about the day he died. Well, sir, it was terrible. I was doing aerobics on the balcony of my apartment when I slipped over the edge. I managed to grab the balcony of the apartment below me. Then some maniac came out and started pounding my fingers with a hammer. I fell, but I landed in some bushes and lived. But then this guy came out again and dropped his refrigerator on me. That did it. St. Peter chuckled a bit and let him into heaven. Tell me about the day you died, he said to the third man. Okay, picture this. I'm naked, hiding in a refrigerator. Now we move on to The Universalist Solution by David Eagleman. God originally structured her universe like those of all the other gods, with a binary categorization of people into good and evil. But it didn't take long for her to realize that humans could be good in many ways and simultaneously corrupt and mean-spirited in other ways. How was she to arbitrate who goes to heaven and who to hell? Dividing the population into two categories, good and bad, it seemed like a more reasonable task when she was younger, but with experience, these decisions became more difficult. In a moment of desperation, a better idea struck her generous spirit. She would grant everyone, every last human, a place in heaven. After all, everyone had something good inside. It was part of the design specification. She shut down the operations in hell, fired the devil, brought every last human to be by her side in heaven. The most important aspect of her new system is that everyone is treated equally. Everyone has the same status. And for the first time, an idea has been realized that never came to fruition on earth: true equality. The communists are baffled and irritated because they have finally achieved their perfect society, but only by the help of a God in whom they don't want to believe. The meritocrats are abashed that they're stuck for eternity in an incentiveless system with a bunch of pinkos. The conservatives have no penniless to disparage. The liberals have no downtrodden to promote. So God sits on the edge of her bed and weeps at night, because the only thing everyone can agree upon is that they're all really in hell. Now Carly will play the familiar hymn, the appropriate hymn for this occasion, Abide with Me. number 101. Thank you, Carly. Back in the old days, the days described by the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament or the Christian Bible, what happened after death was of little importance. Your soul might be lurking around in Sheol, but immortality came, if at all, through your children and your descendants. By the time of Jesus, one faction of Jews believed in the resurrection of the dead. That is, sometime in the future, history would come to an end, and the dead would be resurrected, brought back to life. This was the early Christian view, and Jesus and the Apostle Paul both believed that the end was coming soon, probably when some then living were still alive. But over the centuries, the expected resurrection and final judgment were mostly replaced, especially in the popular mind, by a belief in heaven, a realm to which the fortunate ascended immediately at death. The alternative was hell. You certainly would not want to go there. There were, or there are in Christianity, 4 theories about how you get to heaven. First, heaven is the reward for good behavior during life. Second, heaven is not a reward for good behavior, but the free gift of God to those whose faith is in Jesus Christ. Third, God has decided before the beginning of time who goes where, and there's nothing you can do about it. Fourth is the universalist idea. This is our heritage. Everyone goes to heaven. Everyone is ultimately reconciled to God. In Eastern religions, I'm thinking of Hinduism in particular, reincarnation is the prevailing theory. After you die, you are reborn as someone else. And before you were born, you had other lives. Reincarnation is in fact quite popular in the United States. Nearly 30% of Americans, presumably including many Christians, say they believe in reincarnation. Reincarnation presents its own philosophical challenges, but this morning we'll focus on heaven. Here's a question you may have been wondering about. When you're in heaven, how, if at all, do you learn about what's going on back on earth? One possibility is that you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want to, or even all the time. That sounds attractive, but I wonder how we would do this. Would each of us in heaven have some heavenly version of a television set? We could give it verbal instructions. I want to watch the World Series game. I want to watch my granddaughter's Little League game. I want to watch the Sunday service at my old church. This heavenly television set raises a number of questions. If we can watch events as they happen, can we also watch events from the past? Does God have it all stored up in God's memory? God, the omniscient computer in the sky? Or do we have just one chance at it in real time? By the way, what time zone is heaven in? And does heaven respect daylight savings time? Can we watch anything, or are we restricted to our own family or to activities that we were involved in? Or instead of the magical television set, can we have a ghostly presence right there where the action is, but unaffected by it and unobserved? If we can keep up with family and friends left behind, we would want to be able to communicate with them. I don't know about you, but I've never received a message from anyone who has died. Or perhaps the dead have a way of planting ideas in our brains without our knowing where they come from. Can you prove that they don't? You may have thought of this already. Invasion of privacy. Either with a magical television set or as ghosts, can we see what we shouldn't? Your widow with your successor, for example, or complete strangers. Would it bother you as a live person to think that ghosts might be watching you at any time of the day or night? If we can see what's going on back on Earth, how would what we have access to be regulated or controlled? Or generally, how would we get information about earthly events? Could we listen to NPR, subscribe to the Pottstown Mercury or the New York Times, have access to the internet? Or perhaps our sole source of information would be new arrivals. Of course, another possibility is that we are cut off completely from the world that you and I inhabit now. The newly deceased, the new entrants in heaven, don't share any news with us. Even more extreme, consider the possibility that our memory of our past lives, of this world, is completely wiped out as we walk through the pearly gates upstairs. That would be disappointing. No, that's not quite right. The first problem is that if your memory is wiped out, you would not be aware of it. You wouldn't know what you're missing. The second problem is, in what sense would it still be you? Even if we do retain our memory of our time on Earth, I should think that after a while, a few centuries perhaps, or a few millennia, after a while we would lose interest in what we've left behind. If heaven is worthy of its name, it has to have something that will hold our attention and make us appreciative of being there. Let's look at another aspect of life in heaven, or should I say death in heaven. Will there be conflict there? Surely not. Heaven is, well, it's heaven after all. It's the good place with the imperfections and hassles of earth and this life left behind. But heaven without at least a little conflict sounds boring. There will be other people there, right? We won't have it all to ourselves. If there are numerous people, two or more, I should think, then conflict is inevitable. We won't all think alike on everything. If there isn't conflict, that would mean that we don't have free will, that we're more like spectators and actors. This does not sound attractive. Nearly half of Americans, according to a Gallup poll, nearly half of Americans believe they'll see family and friends in the next life. That raises the question, what age will we all be when we reach heaven? The obvious answer might be, we'll be at whatever age we reached when we die. But what fun is that? I don't think I'll be at my best when I'm 95. And what about the child who dies at 5? Do we get to choose our age? We all at the age we were when we were at our prime? I'm not sure what that would be. Or are we somehow ageless? Do we continue to age once we're there, or do we stay as we were when we arrived? We all assigned the age of 35 when we arrive and stay 35 forever? What about members of our family? I would expect my parents to be older than I am, about a generation older, and I would expect my grandparents to be older still. But I don't suppose my grandmother wants to be a 95-year-old in heaven any more than I do. Will our children and grandchildren be appropriately younger than we are? Then there's a question that Jesus confronted with in Matthew chapter 22. Suppose a person has 7 spouses, one at a time, of course. 7 marriages all end with the spouse's death. Which one are they married to in heaven? Let's assume it's the last one. Let's call her Anne. But suppose Anne's last spouse wasn't you, it was Bob. And Bob's last spouse wasn't Anne, but Charles. It gets complicated. Perhaps we get to pick the favorite spouse. Deborah's favorite spouse was Ed, but Ed's favorite was Frank. Of course, if we expect to be in heaven a long time, a very long time actually, we might want to spend a few decades with each of our ex-spouses, or maybe not. Indeed, we might find something we had never met on Earth. Maybe Jesus was right when he said there would be no marriage in heaven. But I don't think he had in mind free love and promiscuity. Another possibility is that everyone gets just the life, or whatever we should call it, just the life they want in heaven. You want streets paved with gold? You got it. Now, I don't think that getting the heaven we want would present a problem, at least at first, as long as we believe that everything in our heaven is the real thing. But sooner or later, some of us at least, would start wondering why everything is always just the way we want it. Others must inevitably suffer disappointments. That means either that we are the favored one, or more likely, that each of us has our own heaven. The other people who appear to be there, our old friends and relatives, aren't the people they seem to be. They are in their own heavens. People who populate your heaven are just props, though they seem real. And presumably you have a look-alike prop in the heaven of others. Always having everything just the way we want it turns out not to be as satisfying as one might think beforehand. Where's the challenge? Where's the satisfaction of achievement, of overcoming obstacles? We want the responsibility. Deciding how everything should be could become burdensome, and we could make decisions that we later regret. But we've noticed that others don't, when we've noticed that others don't get their way the way we do, we could decide that what we want is a world in which everyone gets just what they want. It won't take very long for you to discover that this arrangement has its drawbacks as well. We can't all have our favorite team win the World Series. As I mentioned, nearly half of Americans believe they'll see family members again in heaven. But what about pets? 43% of us expect to be reunited with pets as well. Well, why not? The life of a dog tends to be a lot shorter than the life of a human. Thus, while most of us have only one mother and one father, we might well have 7 dogs in the course of our life. Do all 7 go to heaven? It wouldn't be fair for one to make it and for the others to be left behind. Do you really want to have 7 dogs in your heavenly household? Is there a large heavenly animal shelter in the sky for unwanted pets? If our dogs and cats are with us up there, what about cows and pigs? And where does food come from? I assume we'll still have to eat. Or at least we'll still want to eat. What fun would heaven be without raspberries and a good steak once in a while? In heaven, you don't have to worry about cholesterol clogging your arteries. You're already dead. You can't die again, can you? Maybe you can. Swedenborg, the 18th century mystical religious leader, taught that heaven is indistinguishable from this world to the degree that people don't realize they've died. If heaven is that much like earth, then we'll need the cows and pigs since we eat them. Heaven where everyone is a vegetarian would be suspicious. A heaven that is indistinguishable from our world would be a heaven with hard work, disappointments, inequality, oppression, crime, hunger, coal mine disasters, tornadoes, earthquakes. I thought you were supposed to get away from all that. And if heaven is indistinguishable from earth, there must be death in heaven. I see 3 choices here. First, when you die in heaven, you go on to another heaven that's just like earth, another one after that, and so on. Second, when you die in this Swedenborgian heaven, you end up in a more traditional heaven. It's clear where you are. Or third, when you have your second death, then you're really dead. The end. Let's go back to the dogs and cats and the cows and pigs. If they get to heaven, how about rabbits and robins, bumblebees and spiders, algae and corals? If a tree, when it dies, goes to heaven, does it suddenly just pop up? Or does it start over again? Perhaps there's a separate area especially reserved for newly arriving trees. Now, some of you don't have to raise your hands, but some of you have been thinking about the suicide bombers and the 72 virgins that await them when they die, when their deed is done. They've gone to their reward. Virgins, by the way, are whatever gender the suicide bomber requests. Where do all these virgins come from? Are they people who've died as virgins? Or are they once again heavenly props, especially created for this duty? They can't all be octogenarian Catholic nuns, can they? Or priests? Is their participation voluntary? What happens to them when they've completed their assignments? Is their virginity restored so they're available for the next suicide bomber? What does the suicide bomber do when he's had a turn with each of the 72? They'll be in heaven a long time after all. Does he pick a favorite? You might want to check the book of Esther in the Bible on that one. To conclude, here is what Socrates has to say about death when he is on trial for corrupting the youth and faces a possible death sentence. This is Plato's story of it. Death is one of two things. Either it is annihilation, and the dead have no consciousness of anything, or as we are told, it is really a change, a migration of the soul from this place to another. Now, if there is no consciousness but only a dreamless sleep, death must be a marvelous gain. If, on the other hand, death is a removal from here to some other place, what we are told is true, that all the dead are there, what greater blessing could there be than this? If on arrival in the other world, beyond the reach of our so-called justice, one will find there the true judges who are said to preside in those courts. Put it in this way. How much would one of you give to meet Orpheus, Musaeus, Hesiod, and Homer? I'm willing to die 10 times over if this account is true. You too, gentlemen of the jury, must look forward to death with confidence and fix your mind on this one belief, which is certain, that nothing can harm the good, either in life or after death. Their fortunes are not a matter of indifference to the goods. Amen. Now our closing hymn, Carly, Sir Arthur Sullivan's St. Gertrude, which we have with the words "Forward through the ages" in our hymnal 114. Carly? Thank you. And now, as Mary extinguishes the chalice flame, let us say together, we extinguish this flame, but not the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and in our hands until we are together again. We close with the words of Mary Oliver, but please stay for a cup of coffee and conversation. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Amen.